Okay. So, Agile business analysis. Um, you guys have a little bit of background in analysis. Actually, in Atoma's case, a significant amount of background in analysis. But let's start at the very beginning. From the IIBA's perspective, and we'll talk a little bit more about the IIBA. They define business analysis in terms of change. This definition, this is from the third version of the BA body of knowledge. It's refined itself over the course of the past few versions, and it says that from the IIBA's perspective, really business analysis is about facilitating change. The BA's job ultimately is to help organizations move from one place to another to meet their needs, and those needs are they're always about change. And so what business analysis is doing is enabling that change. Business analysis tends to be done at the project level. That's where a lot of BAs live. It's where a lot of the BA work is, but that's not the extent of it. Really, good business analysis permeates your organization. There are a lot of different aspects to it. It makes it sometimes troubling because people are very confused about who is the business analysis and what do business analysts do, and it becomes a little bit difficult. In many cases, it is requirements analysis. That is a core task for most BAs, but there's a whole other end-to-end part of the process that is also business analysis, and that's one of the things that we're going to spend a little bit of time with because it's one of the things that Agile and the Agile methodologies try to approach to identify those different aspects of where analysis needs to be done and what analysis needs to be done. Um, we're looking at if we're enabling change in an organization, then we need to know where we are and where we're trying to go. So it's about identifying those things, understanding those things, and being able to make those transitions from where we are to where we want to go. The IIBA is also kind of fun about business analysts. When people start to talk about, well, who's a business analyst? Ultimately, it comes down to anybody who's doing business analysis. I worked in the healthcare industry for about 15 years, and I had a team of, by the time I left, I put together and had a team that was about a dozen business analysts. But at one point in time, I had some access to the HR information, actually just the breakdown, the company organization information, and there were something like 200 people in the organization that had the term analyst attached to their titles. This was in a company of about 2,000 or so. So it was about 10% of the company was somehow aligned with analysis. And while my team focused on the IT area, we were doing project type analysis, requirements type analysis. There were people all throughout the organization who were doing different types of analysis. I'm sure there were also a lot of people, probably more likely at the senior level, who had analysis responsibilities but weren't really named analysts. So a business analysis gets done throughout all types of organizations by all types of people, and the bottom line is that anybody who does business analysis is really a business analyst. in terms of the types of job descriptions or job roles that people have, it's all over the lot. It could be anything, and even this is just a small sampling of the types of people who could be legitimately be called business analysts. One that I see that is actually kind of blatantly missing here is the people on the testing side, the quality assurance engineers, the people who are involved on that side. Although you might think that there's less of a business analyst kind of focus to that work, it there are a lot of activities in that space that are done by business analysts or could be done by business analysts. That's particularly true because if you're a business analyst who is responsible for designing and developing the requirements for a solution, and I'm sort of speaking software solutions at this point, if you've done all of that, then it would make sense and to a certain extent be logical that you would be qualified to test and verify and validate those requirements because you're one of the people who was probably the most familiar with it, with that with the requirements, so it would be logical that you would be qualified to understand and test those requirements. But the bottom line is that anybody in the organization could have any of these titles or any of a number of other titles and still be responsible for doing business analysis. Some key things that BAs are responsible for, and this goes back to the overarching idea that BAs are responsible for determining needs or verifying or validating needs and coming up with solutions to solve those needs. It's just it's these are the kinds of tasks that you're going to need to do in order to do that. The IIBA, are either of you IIBA members?
No, not yet.
Not
I
yet?
mean, I have
I guess
Yeah,
I
you
am a
have it.
member of IBA.
Yeah, yeah, you have your CBAP, and so it's likely you would be a member of the IIBA. By the way,
Okay.
the IIBA certifications, you don't need to technically be a member in order to attain the certifications. It does make sense for a variety of reasons. It makes the certifications less expensive, and there are resources available through the IIBA to help you with the certifications, but technically you don't need to be a member. For Leon's purposes, the IIBA is the International Institute of Business Analysis, somewhat similar, interestingly enough, to the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto. The IIBA was put together by a bunch of BAs, mostly focused in Canada, who got together and said, nobody really understands what business analysis is about. People have been doing business analysis, certainly in the software space, for many, 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 many years, but there was never any codification of what does it mean to do business analysis. It was sort of, and I can say this I can feel free to say this, certainly from the development environment, because I was a developer. There was a feeling amongst a lot of developers, and there probably still is, that, oh, anyone can be an analyst. Uh, what you really need to be able to do is to write code, but figuring out what you need to do and doing the requirements, well, anybody can do that. Well, the people who put together the IIBA did not feel that way. They felt that there were specific things that needed to be done in order to do business analysis correctly and properly, and they came together and said, we're gonna put an organization together that will recognize the fact that business analysis is not, oh yeah, anybody can be an analyst. That it really does require specific talents, and there are specific things about it. And so they put together this organization to basically support the BA community, gain some respect for the people who were actually doing business analysis and who were formally tasked with doing business analysis. They put together once they put the organization together to support this, they determined that what they would do is recognize the fact that people were now starting to do business analysis in a much more formal way, and so they established a professional certification to recognize that. That was the CBAP, the Certified Business Analysis Professional. That was the first certification that the IIBA offered. And it was I always thought that it was a great certification in that, unlike a lot of the other certifications that were out there at the time, the CBAP focused on the idea that not only did you need to know the theory behind doing business analysis, you needed to have the practical experience of doing business analysis in order to achieve the certification. So they mandated a significant number of hours of BA work that you needed to do in order to achieve the certification. And I always thought that was that was a really great thing to do. Um, my in my development background, I kind of was exposed to the MCSEs, Microsoft Certified Systems Engineers, I guess was what it was, and they were much more knowledge-based kinds of things. It became almost a joke in that, you could achieve this Microsoft certification and still not have a clue how to do your job. And that was not true with the CBAP certification. It was you needed to be able to prove that you could do the job. That's extended now. They added several years later. They added the CCBA, which is Certificate of Competency in Business Analysis, which was still an experience-based certification in addition to having knowledge, but the experience requirement was significantly less, so that they could recognize the fact that you didn't have to be doing business analysis for half your life in order to be certified. That people who had spent 3 to 5 years in the industry doing business analysis could also be certified to indicate professional competency. This has now expanded again. A couple of years ago, the IIBA introduced the ECBA, which is the Entry Certificate in Business Analysis. I actually go both ways on this certification because it is knowledge based as opposed to experience based. And one of the things and the reason that it's so kind of near and dear to my heart is because a lot of my background in business analysis was not really doing business analysis, but in formulating and managing a team of business analysts. So I was the driving force and the guiding force behind this, putting together a team of people to do this, um, and that, for better or worse, limited the amount of time that I actually spent doing business analysis. Um, that meant that it was not realistic for me to achieve CBAP certification or even CCBA certification because my focus was all on my team and not on me personally, even though I was spending a lot of time with business analysis activities and business analysis background. The ECBA, in one sense, was intended to recognize that kind of thing. I raised this with the IIBA a long time ago that, because the certification requirements were really practical hands-on business analysis, it made it difficult, if not impossible, for people who were not involved in project work on a day-to-day basis to achieve the certification. And that I said, for somebody like me who is passionately interested in it and works with people who do it all the time and helps people who do it all the time because of this specific task-based, um, um, experience-based uh, qualification, it made things difficult. So they did put in a certification, and one of the things about the ECBA is that it addresses the idea of people who are managers of business analysts and not necessarily business analysts themselves. The downside to that is the way they titled the certification. By titling it an entry certification in business analysis, it kind of trivializes it so that it it kind of does the job, but it doesn't do the job. There is, and I don't know where they're going with this, on the horizon. A couple of years ago, they announced that they were going to do a fourth level certification, which was above and beyond the CBAP certification, and that was intended to be something that would recognize the people who were not only working business analysts, but also thought leaders and heavily involved in supporting and developing the BA community, um, so that there was in addition to doing the job, it was also giving back to the domain. That hasn't come out yet, but I think of people, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of these names, but people like Coop Coopersmith and Angela Wick and Barbara Karkanord and the Larsons, the people who have really spent a large amount of time beyond just doing business analysis, but formulating the whole body of knowledge to allow the business analysis domain to grow and strengthen. There was and that one, um, there was a significant additional component of involvement in the community that they were expecting. That hasn't come into play yet, and I don't know honestly whether it's still on the IIBA's calendar or on their radar to do it. I just mentioned that they have just released a certification in data analytics, and that's brand new. The information is not even, it's really just being published right now. Um, and that's intended to recognize the fact that data and data analytics are a really serious part of the analysis domain, and so they've got this certification that is coming out to manage that. Um, More about the IIBA. The IIBA is an umbrella kind of organization. They provide a lot of resources. Um, they there are webinars that are sponsored by the IIBA. There are research things like white papers that come out from the BA community, that are kind of centrally focused or centrally organized through the IIBA. One of the other side perks to being a member of the IIBA is that they have access to an online library of books, which is available. I think PMI has the same access, but it's a whole library of business and business analysis and other sorts of books that are available. Probably probably 1,000 or more titles that are available that you can basically read for free as a member of the IIBA. So there is that. There's a network of local chapters. In various places around the globe, that where the BA community gets together, and those chapters also sponsor events and sponsor presentations to again get the BA community together and helping itself to grow itself. Um, these are all sort of perks of being a member of the IIBA. It costs about 100 and in the U.S. it costs about $110 a year to be a member. I think it costs like 125 for your initial initial membership. That does provide you with discounts on the certification exams. It also provides you with a free copy of the BA Body of Knowledge, which is the encyclopedic reference of BA techniques and processes. Um, the Agile extension is, which is what this course is based on, was just published. The second version of the Agile extension was just published in conjunction with the Agile Alliance. That's this information, or the information in this course. So that's out there and available in terms of, I believe they have two different publications that are aligned to the data analytics certification. So they've got a lot of information. That's out there that is all intended to help support BAs to be able to do their job better. The Agile extension, um, I've mentioned this a little bit. It's not it's not a cookbook methodology for doing Agile. It really is about understanding the basis for Agile business processes. And in particular, agile development processes. It's looking at the the idea of business analysis being focused on facilitating change, understanding that those kinds of changes are frequently done in the um, under the guise of doing projects, and it's understanding um, how to do those things efficiently to help move things forward, because the business environment now is moving forward extremely rapidly, and in order to continue to be viable in many areas, businesses have to be fast and flexible. Um, the business environment is just changing too rapidly. There's not the luxury of people spending years developing software solutions for problems. It's now instantaneous. People have to be able to do these things very rapidly, and if there's a heavyweight process, a lot of heavyweight processes that go along with it, it just slows things down. And so the whole idea of Agile and the Agile extension is how do we modify the way we do business analysis to function in an environment where we need to be rapid and constantly changing. Um, the Agile extension does provide, similar to what the BA body of knowledge provides. It does provide some encyclopedic kind of guidance about techniques that are generally applicable to doing business analysis in an Agile environment. One of the key things about it is that these are just guidelines to get you started. It's they they explain techniques. The techniques are there, and they say, okay, well, here are specific areas where this technique might be useful to you, or any one of these multiple techniques might be useful to you depending on your environment and the way your people work. You can pick and choose whatever you need. This is just designed to give you the information that says, if you're going to execute this technique, these are the things that you want to do. These are the goals of this technique. These are where it's likely to be applicable. These are some of the pitfalls that go along with this technique. All of that is included in the Agile extension, the same way it's included in the BA body of knowledge. Again, the Agile extension doesn't say this is the way you have to do things. It just says this is the way that you may want to choose to do things. And focusing again on the adaptability of these things, um, the likelihood that you're going to be able to use any of the BA techniques as it comes out of the box is I would say it's relatively small. You can start from there, but almost anything that you do is going to have to be tailored to your specific circumstance. I think this goes to a little bit of Itomo where you were coming from on this to try and learn the right way to do things. And I think the thing that the agile extension and agile methodologies in general try to emphasize is that the right way is the right way for you. You can have guidance, you can have guidelines that apply. You can say these are the things that we want to do, but you always need to be looking at it from the perspective of does this work for us under these circumstances? And that may change over the course of time. It may change over the course of the spectrum of different kinds of things that you're doing. There are projects that you'll find that are more aligned or inclined towards a waterfall type of methodology. That may make sense in certain circumstances. In other circumstances, it won't make sense. You mentioned that your company does a hybrid kind of thing where you do some waterfall things and then switch over into doing agile things, and that honestly makes perfect sense. If you say that there are a certain number of things that we need to have in place in order to do these things, certain number of things where we know that requirements are relatively definable and relatively static, then a waterfall methodology works. That can be coupled with a circumstance where other parts of the project may lend themselves much more readily towards the more pure agile ways of doing things. So hybrid makes perfect sense.
Okay, good to know.
Yep, yep, yep. The idea of business analysis and certainly agile analysis is that we need to get the job done. We need to get the job done in a way and in a timeline that makes sense for the organization. Again, I mentioned that that the business environment is changing rapidly in many, if not most places. Companies have to respond more quickly, and the key to that is not necessarily speed, it's efficiency. If we'll see going further on, one of the principles behind agile analysis is determining what work doesn't need to be done and not doing that work, not wasting time, not wasting resources, not wasting energy. It's about focus. It's about this is what we need to do right now. This is the critical the critical piece that we need to get done right now, and we need to get all of the extraneous stuff out of the way. So we want to, you know, it's about doing business analysis is about increasing the value for the company, creating value for the company, and one of the ways to create value is by getting all of the extraneous stuff out of the way and focusing on what is what is the value that we're trying to create and what's the most efficient way for us to create that. The AAC, basically the certification, will basically imply that you have looked at these these kinds of premises and have understand that um, there is a specific way of doing business analysis, good business analysis in an agile environment in order to be able to do things quickly and efficiently, and that by understanding the premises that are put forth in the agile extension, you set yourself up to be able to help your company do that better. Agile is a big thing. People have been saying agile for a long time. I think, interestingly enough, the focus from the IIBA and certainly PMI, because PMI has also come out with a whole focus on agile. I think this is really critical to the entire business environment. Uh, People have been saying agile development for 20 years, and the problem with it was that nobody really understood what that meant. The classic implementation of agile was, well, we stop writing documentation and we all sit in a room and we write whatever code we think we need to write, and we show that to our users, and our users say, well, gee, that's not what we wanted, so we go back and write something else. That was a classic implementation of Agile. Uh, while it did help in the sense of at least the people who were ultimately using the solutions were the ones who were being asked whether the solution worked. Um, so that was a step forward. The communication between the business users and the development side of the house was critical, but there it was basically anarchistic. There was not really any formality to it. People didn't really understand that there were principles underneath this that really were guiding this whole transition towards the more communication between the sides of the house. And I think the focus from the IIBA and from PMIs saying that there's a place for business analysis in the agile environment. It's not just about a bunch of customers and a bunch of developers getting together and magically putting together something. That there really was and needs to be some kind of framework around that, and that framework is really analysis. Now that that understanding is becoming more and more accepted, I think you're going to see that agile really um, does take off in the business world, and continues to take off and continues to take over the business world because it makes sense. Agile's about getting things to market quickly, and this really goes back to the fact that the world is changing. The world is moving a lot more rapidly these days. Uh, People don't have the luxury of spending a long amount of time developing products or developing solutions. It's what can you do for me right now? If I can't get this if I can't get this product to market in the next 6 months, somebody else is going to get the product to the market, and I'm going to lose my opportunity. We had this kind of in the healthcare industry when the healthcare exchange um, came out a couple of years ago. It was we had to focus on it. We had to get it done. It was time sensitive. The basically the introduction of the exchange was announced, and in certainly in the New York environment, the major healthcare companies were all saying, okay, well, this is coming as of this date, so we better be ready. Our products better be ready to go into this environment. And there were a certain number of companies who just couldn't make that happen. There were a certain number of companies who made it happen but didn't make it happen very well, and they suffered. So it was, we didn't have any choice. We had to go with it. It was a stressful time because, and background in that was with the great state of New York, they weren't making decisions until the last minute. And so we were in a position of saying, how do we build our product? And they said, we'll let you know. Okay. Hopefully you'll let us know before our product is supposed to be on the market. But there was no real guarantee about that. They were saying, we're working it out, and unfortunately, until we work it out, we can't give you any information or any guidance, and we're sorry that there's a date on the board, but that's what it is. So the goal with Agile, getting things done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Excuse me. the benefits on Agile, well, you're going to hear this. Oh, I'm sneezing again. Sorry. Wow, I must be allergic to Agile. We are going to see faster speed to market because we're being more efficient about it. Uh, as we are more efficient, as our development teams and our development environments are more efficient, obviously we're going to be eliminating wasteful time, wasted time, wasted activities, and theoretically we're going to get more production from the people who are doing this. Um, Agile is all about adaptability and being able to adapt to change, and so the principles behind it and all of the underlying stuff there is addressing the idea that the world is changing rapidly, and the only way to succeed is if we can change rapidly. So we have to be able to um, manage that change better and faster. Um, when I talked a couple of minutes ago about the whole idea of the original implementations of Agile, getting business people and development people in a room together and starting to do that, um, that was one of the big things with the previously existing waterfall type development environments. It was the business customers came and talked to the development team or talked to somebody who was responsible for the quote requirements, and then the business people went off back to their environment, and the development people went off into their cubby holes and built this solution that they thought the customers needed, and neither one of them talked to each other for a long time until the development team had some sort of product which they threw over the wall to the business people, who promptly looked at it and said, "What is this?" And the reasoning behind that was because uh, the business people didn't know what the development people were doing, and the development people didn't really know what the business people were doing. The whole idea of Agile was to bring those two sides together and say, in order for the business people to build the right tools or in order for the development people to build the right tools for the business people, they really had to have a solid understanding of what the business people were trying to do and how they were doing it. Um, coming from the development side of the house, I know that there were lots of times when we built products where it made perfect sense to us. It made perfect sense to us as developers. You know, we built this whole nice product, and yet when we showed it to the business people, they had problems with it because we didn't understand exactly what they were doing. Classic, the classic one on this is things like data entry applications. A lot of, when you're processing high volume data entry type things as a business person, one of the things that I've learned over the long haul is that data entry people hate mice. For a data entry person, if you have to type things, their goal is to keep their fingers on that in place on the keyboard with as little motion away from that keyboard as possible. And yet, as a developer, as somebody who is not focusing on the speed of my fingers, is not necessarily a speed typist, although I did learn how to type when I was in high school, and it always made sense to me. But as a developer, I worked with people who were one finger typists. And so for them, being able to accomplish things using a mouse, um, dragging things on up and down and across the screen made perfect sense. So when they designed applications, they did it from that perspective, whereas the people who were typists who needed to keep their fingers on the keyboard were driven crazy by the fact that every time they wanted to do something, they had to pick up the mouse. Or if their screens were not designed properly, so if the tab sequence was not properly created in the form design. They were constantly having to go back and figure out how to get the cursor to the field that they needed it to. Where for people on development side who were used to sitting there with a mouse, it was no big deal. Those are the kinds of things that um, being agile, putting together the people who were going to have to use the tool with the people who were building the tool and allowing them to work together so that the developers could see how the business users were going to be using the tool had a big impact on the way things were done. The products were visible to the people that needed to use them, and so that was a big blessing towards moving towards agile development. And obviously, if the business people are communicating with the IT people, um, and both sides are understanding each other. And by the way, that does go both ways. It's not just about IT understanding the business, it's also about the business understanding IT, because when you're talking about software and the software environment, there are constraints that are technologically founded. It's just that's the reality. You're using technology. Technology has its own set of constraints. If the business people don't understand that there are those constraints and that those constraints have to be worked with, you have this mismatch, and you wind up with banging heads between the business and the IT side of the house. So as there's a closer connection, um, it allows both sides to be able to understand where the other side is coming from and to focus on saying, you know what, ultimately our goal here, certainly from the IT side, is not to build a spiffy application. It's to build an application that allows the business users, my business users, to do their job better. Okay. Um, Little bits and pieces about the AAC. It's it really is key to business analysis. With the migration towards agile, it's important that BAs understand where they fit into this. And this, by the way, is something that has been a battle for the IIBA and BAs in general, um, for several years. There obviously were a lot of implementations that said we don't need no analysts. We just have our developers and our developers and our business people do all of this, not understanding that it does take knowledge, and it takes a specific skill set to be able to successfully do business analysis. And BAs do have a significant home in the agile paradigms. I think of, one of the things that I find interesting is, if you've had Scrum training, Scrum talks about the development team, and I think that was a true disservice to a lot of the people who were involved in development. I think, you know, when they titled that group of people the development team, there was immediate exclusion, certainly of analysts, and even to a certain extent from the testing function. There were a lot of places. Interestingly enough, the healthcare company that I worked for, when they started to implemented Agile, but only involved the business users and the development team, which is to say the coding team. They forgot to involve the quality assurance team, and they certainly forgot to. They sort of forgot to involve the analysis team. Um, they put an analyst on the project. They put a project manager on the project, and they said, "Well, okay, we have this project team that has business users and developers, that has a project manager, that has a business analyst, and sooner or later we'll have some testing people, but we're being agile." And it was like, well, just because you put the business users and the developers together and told them to talk to each other doesn't mean that you're being agile. Um, So AAC is designed to say that there is a home in agile development for business analysis. I get to where I was. Lost my slides. Sorry about that, guys. There we go. Um, AAC is a certification that can apply it at a bunch of different levels. Obviously, if you're doing business analysis, AAC is something that certainly makes sense. If you're at a management level, AAC also makes sense. It's the kind of thing where uh, a successful transition to agile for an organization involves the entire organization. I think too many people have failed at implementing agile because the impetus and the focus has been on the practical side of it. It's, in order to be agile, our development team needs to be agile. And that's really kind of a fallacy. Uh, just having an agile development team is not going to make your organization agile. We'll see as we go further forward, but it should be already pretty obvious that the organization itself needs to understand what it means to be agile and needs to embrace the ideas that support an agile development methodology. Um, BA consultants and trainers. I'm not sure why that's there. I mean, trainers because it provides me with an opportunity to do some work, but I don't know why, unless you're interested in ultimately being a trainer, why that would make sense. So the AAC itself, um, it's there are a limited number of things that are required in order to achieve the AAC certification. Basically, it's an understanding of the information that's in the Agile extension, is what it comes down to. Um, the implication is that you have some Agile background, Agile experience, uh, but really the certification itself really only tests whether or not you know and understand the information that's in the Agile extension. Um, the interesting thing on this slide is that this represents a collaboration between the Agile Alliance and the IIBA. IIBA, while it's stands on its own, has also been looking at the business analysis space and said, we are the business analysis people, the Agile Alliance people, the Scrum people are Agile people, and we can't ignore them. So our best advice would be to collaborate with those people and say, you guys know about Agile, we know about business analysis. Let's get together and say, how do we merge these two? IIBA has sort of done those kinds of things with other analysis organizations or other certifying bodies. I mentioned IREB, which is the Requirements Engineering Board. There's BCS, the British Computer Society, and the IIBA has forged alliances with both of those to say, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is to improve the quality and the caliber of business analysts. How can we collaborate and cooperate on that? So BCS uh, was specifically it's a learning organization, the British Computer Society. They have a number of different certifications, diploma type things, and the IIBA forged an alliance with them to cross honor their certifications. So if you have a BCS, an introductory BCS certificate, it's the equivalent of probably now it would be an ECBA. I think initially they were talking about it being the equivalent of the CCBA. Um, but they're trying to do that. So with the AAC, they've kind of aligned it with the Agile Alliance. The outlier there, by the way, is that the IIBA has not been able to forge alliances with the PMI, the Project Management Institute, and I think that to a certain extent is that PMI perceives of themselves as the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They are the biggest at this. They are many, 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 many times the size and the penetration of the IIBA, and so they've just basically said our way or the highway, and we're not interested in talking to anybody else about their way. It's a little sidebar. I'm a PMI member, and I know a lot of people in the BA space have um, taken the PMI PBA, the Professional Business Analysis certification from PMI, and actually have good things to say about it. But the two organizations have not been able to come together and say how do we stop competing? So the Agile exam, the actual certification exam focuses, and this starts to get into um, what the whole Agile extension is about. I'm noticing that it is now 10:30. Would you guys like to take about a 10 or 12-minute break here so that we can?
Yeah, break is fine.
Okay, I'm going to shut
Thank
the
you.